Dan Bublett's Comedy Productions.
My friend Dan, he's got a podcast, 'cause all comics need a podcast, and nobody had a podcast called The Art of Bombing. So Dan went out and bought a tape deck. Who knows why he bought a tape deck? Podcasts don't get played on tape decks, but Dan is from the 80s. So hey there, all you funny jerks, come talk to Dan about your work. Tell him all about your worst times. It's The Art of Bombing. Welcome to an all-new episode of The Art of Bombing presents Between Bombs, Callbacks, where we call back the most recent episode. And this week, we are calling back episode 284 with my good friend, Mandy Kay. How's it going, Josh? How you doing on this fine day?
I'm doing great because I finally did it. Your streak is over, my friend.
My streak is over. My streak.
And now...
We had to do a reset. I had to do the intro twice.
That's right. Days since the last accident is now back down to 0. And Dan is trying to...
Guess we're not getting that free lunch after all.
That's right. The set of steak knives is not going to be shipped. This is great, guys. So I'm definitely starting this thing off with a bang. You know what? Speaking of that... When I was listening to this episode with Mandy Kay, that's actually one of the things she brings up, is that she feels that you should start a show with tried and true material.
Yes, in comedy, that is true. When you're doing a intro for a podcast, there's not really tried and true. I guess I could rehearse my intro.
It is a little different every time, unfortunately.
It is a little different. That's the thing. It's a more improv when I'm doing my podcast intro. But with comedy, I guess you can do a little bit of improv with your opening. But again, going back to what you said, or what Mandy said, using tried and true material and good material is very important. Now, I think too, another thing that we should do before we get too far into this, we should take this opportunity to take a pause. If you're listening, you can go back and listen to episode 284 with Mandy Kay if you haven't already, so that you'll understand the context of what we're about to talk about.
Yeah, that's right.
Here we go. Here's your pause.
Enjoy.
All right, now that you've listened to episode 284 with Mandy Kay, we shall continue talking about deep diving into that conversation. What do you open with, Josh? What's your go-to? Do you have a go-to opening joke? Because they say not only with an opening joke, you talk to legends in comedy or people who've been doing it for a long time, that there's a couple different qualifications for an opening joke. And that's one, it should be kind of a good icebreaker. 2, it should be a joke that kind of lets the audience know who you are, or kind of get an idea about you, not necessarily get, a joke that's going to, they're going to be able to know you all in all, but it's going to give them some insight into who you are, what's going to happen on the show. And 3, needs to be really, really funny. Needs to be either your best joke or your second best joke.
Yeah. We actually had, I think we did a kind of a how to construct a set.
We did
bombs episode. So you should probably go and check that out if you're listening. Yeah, your question was how to start, and I agree.
Yeah, well, how do you start? Is what I asked.
Start?
How do you start?
Yeah.
What's your go-to?
Well, I agree with Mandy. I think it has to be something tried and true. So, and I've got an assortment of jokes that I can pull from that are tried and true, but it's not going to be a new joke. It's not going to, I'm not going to rely on my own. I feel like I'm putting too much pressure on myself when I try to sort of rely on my own charisma or something to happen in the moment to really, that doesn't mean that I don't use what's happening in the space to kind of comment on some things. If something comes into my mind that's really relevant and I want to prove to the room that I'm in the room with them, I think it's a great way to start. Yeah. But it's not something that like if I'm putting all my hope into that being the thing that rockets me off with this crowd, I'm in for a big disappointment. Right. So it's great if that works. And Mandy on the show, she's an experienced comic and she does this too, where if she's got something that she, wants to trot out there based on what just happened in the room, great, she'll go with it. But the main plan, part of her plan and mine too, is to open with something that is about me. It's introductory. And it's a very high confidence joke, meaning when I do it 20 times, it hits 19 times. Like it's not something that I'm, so I think that I think it's also got to be easy to understand, meaning like
don't make them think too hard right up top.
Agreed. Like I definitely have some high confidence stuff that I'll end.
Got to ease into it,
right? And you probably do too. Like my closing bit is longer, and it's a longer story. It has high laughs per minute, and it's probably the best joke. But I can't necessarily open with it every time because it requires too much of the audience. They have to pay attention to it. And longer stories, as I've learned, and I've mentioned this on the show, you can't just roll out long stories, even if they're really high confidence and funny in the beginning, because sometimes they're not ready for that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I know one thing I've struggled with, and I've seen, some comics, they'll open up with doing a little improv, or, as we kind of call it, crowd work. And that's where you're making observation, you're being in the moment.
Yep.
And I'm not good at that. I've always found that whenever I deviate from what I had planned, what my set list is, and I try to do some kind of an improv or observation about the room, I end up making it awkward.
Oh yeah. Look what I did. Let's start from inside of a crater.
Well, yeah, I like to make things difficult for me. I don't want to just go ride the wave. I want to do a complete reset and start from scratch. I want to work my way to those laughs.
Right. Yeah. So just start off racist. I think that's.
Well, I mean, just walking on stage, I'm sure people automatically think that based on how I look.
I'm already there. I walked out on stage, Josh. So
I don't have to say anything out loud.
Right. They're like, okay.
People probably already make that assumption about me.
Yeah, me too. Probably.
I tried a joke one time because people at the show, they kept making jokes about looking like they were at the January 6th, the insurrection, or jokes about that kind of thing and how they looked. And when I got up there, I tried to make a joke about it too, or they talked about it in their act, and it happened a couple times. And the joke that I tried was, I said, I know my head and face says that I was probably at the January 6th Capitol riot, but the way I dress says I didn't get invited.
Yeah, there you go.
They told me to stay at home.
That's great. That's great.
It didn't hit though. It didn't hit that night, but I don't know. But I thought that was a great opening joke, but
well, I think that plays into what we're saying, doesn't it? Like it sounds funny, worked on me, but
it's
not. It's new, and it's not a high confidence joke, and it needs some work before it gets a position at the very beginning.
Yeah, I think it was. I said, my face and head says that I wanted to go to the January 6th insurrection, but the way I dress says I didn't get invited. I think that's how I worded it. But whatever way, but still, it just didn't work. And like for me, my opener is pretty simple. I mean, it's also, I'm still using the same opener that I did on my album. Because I was using a different opener that was just a quick, easy thing, but it turned out that it was a hacky premise. And, I honestly didn't realize it till somebody else pointed it out. And then I went and looked online, and lo and behold, it was a kind of a hacky stock joke
Yeah.
that, and I was like, oh crap, honest mistake. So let's get rid of that. But I went back to my other opener that I have on my album because I've had a heck of a time trying to figure out a new opener that's good enough. And the opener that I got now that I've been using, it works good. It's a good way. It meets the criteria of it's lighthearted. It gives them an opportunity to get to know me. It's a good icebreaker, and and it gets a good laugh. And it's because for my opening joke, I talk about my name right up top, and it's
Hmm.
addressing an elephant in the room because I
Perfect.
do have a funny last name.
Yeah, and it puts you where they are.
Yep.
Booblets. Well, what just was said there? Like I thought it was. I was reading the poster. I thought it was bubblets. That's so you've already got something that they can latch onto, which is like perfect recipe, like
Mm-hmm.
perfect ingredient for opening material. Another place to look if you're in Dan's position where you're like, okay, I have an established act, but I'm trying to push myself and grow, which we talked about in the
Yep.
last callback.
Absolutely.
One way to do that is to take your last bit or your closing bit and change it so that it can work as an opening bit.
Yep.
If it's got the right ingredients.
Yeah.
Doesn't work every time.
And with what I've been closing with as of late, which is, relationship stuff, I don't know that I could open up with that right away. I don't
Okay.
think it gets a good laugh, because that's the other thing you got to consider too. Even if, whatever the joke you're opening with, you want to try to get a laugh within the first 15 to 20 seconds, so having a quick, even if it's, a little bit longer, having a laugh line within that first 15 to 20 seconds is pretty important. Basically having a hook, essentially. And what I'm closing with right now, I don't think it has that to where it would meet, it would probably get a good laugh, probably could get a laugh within, the 15 to 20 seconds, but I don't think it's enough as an icebreaker or for them to get to know me a little bit. And I feel like that, and as a opening joke, to your point, is that when you do that, some jokes won't work, and that's one where I feel like they have to kind of know me before that joke works anyway.
Yeah.
And so to start with it would probably backfire.
Yeah, not a solution every time, but
Yep.
maybe some other stuff in there can be retooled. And you'll naturally improve the jokes in the middle over time.
Yep,
And those
absolutely.
can be promoted into a better position. Have you ever heard in any comics sort of come at this with the mindset of, well, I want to start with something newer because in the beginning, the audience is more forgiving and more likely to laugh?
I mean, I'm sure comedians have done that. I haven't heard that necessarily. I've always been kind of in the camp of start with good material. If you're going to try new stuff, kind of throw it in the middle and then close strong. So that's
Yeah,
kind of always the camp that I've been in. So,
right.
but as far as them being more forgiving, I don't know. It depends on the crowd. I think that's a case by case scenario where it kind of depends on your audience,
Yeah,
because if you come out and do a bunch of new material and say you're doing 15 minutes and you do 5 minutes of new material and none of it's working,
yeah,
by then I feel like you're losing your audience,
yeah.
and it doesn't matter how forgiving they are, they're pretty much checked out. They've
Right.
already decided, oh, you're not funny, so you're going to really have to work hard to really win them over and bring them back in.
Yeah, yeah. It could be that that theory is better for established comics who the
Mm-hmm.
audience already knows.
Well,
Like
I
you can
think
get away
that
with that.
plays another important part too, is if they know you, because once you have an established fan base, or you're a draw or a well-known comedian, your fans are coming to support you, and they don't necessarily care what the material is or how good it is. They just want to be in your presence and see you live. And especially when it's being promoted as, hey, I'm working on new material, they're definitely going to be forgiving of that. They're just there for that experience. But
Right.
when you're a no name, you know, They don't. They're just like, be funny.
Yeah.
If you're not funny, you're
Yeah.
out.
That's right. Yeah, people are typically more critical, or they are a little bit more guarded, and it's a bigger test if they don't know
Mhm.
you. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. And I mean, and I, talking, I know we're talking about your opening joke, but now we kind of moved into throwing in some new material in your set. That's something I just did this last weekend. I've finally started writing some new stuff, and I put it, not kind of towards the beginning just because it played off really well with some of my opening material. And so I put it in right away. Um and some of it did okay, some of it didn't. Part of the reason I think some of it didn't do well, obviously I'm still working it out, so it's very wordy, got to, cut the fat, but also some of it's a little darker, so it might be a situation where it's too early to be that dark.
Right. Right. Yeah, timing is everything, and so is staying under your time, which you guys talked about a little
Yeah.
bit on that episode
Well,
too.
staying under your time and being able to do the time you set.
Yeah.
Those are, I mean, they go hand in hand.
Yep. I think it kind of immediately builds trust with the person booking you for you to say something like, well, no, if you want 40 minutes, you probably need to find somebody else for this. Or
Mhm.
I can give you solid 40 minutes of comedy, but it's not going to be me alone. Maybe I
Yeah.
can bring somebody else, right?
Yep.
Like approaching the situation is, but being honest about how much actual time you have. It was the example I heard.
Yeah. No, and absolutely. I mean, you really do have to be honest about that stuff. That's exactly. And if you've listened to this podcast for a long time, or even if a handful of episodes, you've probably heard a story where the scenario of them bombing was because they lied about their time.
Yeah, exactly. So many times.
I
Like
mean,
I didn't know how much time I really had.
yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say. I think if we were gonna do like a top three like causes of bombs, that would be in the top three. Not being honest about how much time you have would be in there. I would say not asking enough questions about a corporate gig.
Yes.
And for a third, oh man, I would say probably trying to do too much new material.
Yeah. Yeah. Or
But
thinking,
just
or
trying to think.
doing something in the middle of the show, like making some ill-advised decision. There's been a bunch of those too.
Oh
Where,
yes, that's a really good point. You're right. That would definitely be in the top three. Making a poor choice, whether it be calling somebody out, doing bad crowd
doing something
work.
the booker said specifically not to do.
Yep. That's a
Uh,
good point.
just like, hey, this is going great. I'm invincible, and then totally pivoting to new material in the middle of it.
Yeah, I'd say
Like,
lying about your time, circumstantial bombs, and that what I mean by that is again that goes into that not asking enough questions.
yeah,
So you put yourself in a circumstance where you set yourself up for failure
exactly.
right away, and then that's a great example of making a poor choice
Yeah,
and doing something that you shouldn't or whatever. That's yeah, those would definitely be the top three. But we're talking about being honest with your time, and I think that's really important. You know comics, I feel like we as comics would kind of lie. And even though we're talking about being honest with your time, I know people listening, you're going to lie about your time because you want that spot. That's how you're going to learn. You're going to learn the hard way. That's fine. Totally get it. We've all done it. So,
yeah,
but the more you're honest with how much time you actually have, I feel like the better off you're going to be too, in the sense where bookers are going to appreciate that honesty.
right.
That's one thing I always appreciate when I ask somebody, if they can do a set, and it's, I say, oh, okay, so I want to book you for the show. It's 15 minutes. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. I only got 10 minutes. I'm not going to not put them on the show necessarily. What I'm going to do is, oh, okay, so they got a solid 10. So I guess instead of
on.
having them do 15, I'll just have them do a guest spot,
Yeah.
a 10-minute guest spot,
In the following scenario is going to happen to every comic, and this is why I think you always have to be honest about it, no matter what. The scenario is, hey, Dan, can you do 15 minutes? No, I'll only have 5. Okay, night of the show, curtain opens. Hey, Dan, Katie didn't show up. And can you do 15? I said 5. I know. Do your best, right? And then you're out there, and now we both have a mutual agreement that I only have 5, and we both know that I'm going to have to stretch to do the rest.
Yep.
And now you're a hero for going in and doing
trying.
extra time and trying to hold the show together.
Even if you don't do it well, you're still a hero because you're trying.
Exactly. The expectations are managed from the person booking the show, and you've built trust by still getting to stretch yourself.
Yep. That's a good point. That's a good point about that, because that does happen more times than one would think.
Yes.
Where that's the exact scenario. Yeah, I definitely and going into the, talking about being honest with your time. Yeah, like I said, bookers will appreciate that stuff. And it helps them plan better too. And I think part of the reason that we do lie about that stuff, our time, is because we're afraid of losing a gig. And it's okay, because do you want a gig, and do you want to do a gig and do poorly at it because you lied about your time, or wait till you're ready, and go do a show that helps you get ready so you can eventually do the show, the show or the gig that you passed on because you weren't ready. And then when you do it, you totally obliterate because, and I can't even say that word.
Yeah, obliterate.
Obliterate. Thank you. Obliterate because you waited until you were ready. You went and trained for the marathon, then you won the marathon.
There you go. Yeah, and last thing I'll say about time, is if you're a new comic and time isn't necessarily something that you're being asked for right now and it's brand new, I think the biggest exercise you can do for time is just, either staying under the amount of time you do have in your open mic that you're going to, or just doing what you have. Like if it's a 5-minute open mic and you just have 3, go do 3. You'll be everyone's hero.
But I want to add one thing to that. If you only have 3 and it's a 5-minute open mic, a nice common courtesy is to let the host know.
Yes.
And say, hey, I know I get 5 minutes. I'm probably only going to do 3.
So don't smoke a cigarette during my set.
Exactly. It's just a courtesy, because that's one thing, can really make a show awkward, is when a comic goes up to do 5 but only can do 2 and they bail early. Sometimes it's because they just they just break under pressure and can't do it. Other times it's because they only had 3 minutes to begin with and they just never said anything.
Right.
And so it's important to let the hosts know that if you're not going to do the full time in an open mic, and again, letting them know, being honest, they're going to appreciate that. They're not going to, if you're signed up for a 5-minute open mic and you do 3 minutes, but you don't tell the host you were going to do 3 minutes, they're now going to, not necessarily look down on you, but they're going to, and other bookers that might be there, because a lot of comedians book things, are going to know that, oh, you don't have enough time to do these shows, But if you're honest, they're going to be like, oh, they can't do this yet, but they had a really good 3 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Another maybe final topic here, we have a few more minutes, and I thought it was relevant, was like she lays out a really good definition for herself on why she does comedy that I feel like so few comics have. Like comics can tell you what they do, but they can't tell you why they do it. I think she can.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, and we're talking about this point is defining yourself as a comic, or defining what is a comic. I guess I would ask, what do you consider? What's your definition of being a comedian?
Yeah, I think it's being.
When is it okay? And I've even seen this on Facebook groups and people asking this question all the time. When is it okay to define yourself as a comedian?
When is it okay?
Yeah.
Meaning,
and what defines it? Well, they kind of go hand in hand, because how you define what a comedian is kind of defines when you can call yourself a comedian, if you've checked off the definition.
Hmm. Well, I don't know. I think
I know
I
that went
think
real deep.
well, no matter what you do, I think you have to be able to articulate why you do it.
Yep.
And I think that that's a really big ask for people. Like I
Mhm.
think a lot of people can't answer that question necessarily, even
Yep. And
comics.
I think, to your point, I think it's almost more important to try to figure out why you're doing it versus when can you say that you are something, or how you define it.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of comedians want to define what it is to be a comedian, and being able to, when they can officially call themselves a comedian,
Mm,
where it be, oh, what was it, after your first paid gig, or was it after
mm,
your first open mic, or after you were doing it for a year, whatever, they, however they want to define it. But really, none of that matters. That's all, that's really uh, stand up purist BS. You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like, it doesn't
Like
matter.
these kind of rites of passage. Like if you've
Exactly.
slept in
But
a
it's,
car, you're a
yeah,
comic.
you're a
Or
comic. Yeah.
if you've done a show at this venue or headlined or those kinds of
You've been
things.
stiffed by a producer, things like that. Yeah, exactly. And that's all just BS. I mean, really, instead of worrying about when you can call yourself a comic, you should just be worrying about getting funny and doing comedy.
Yeah.
And to your point, trying to figure out why you're even doing it in the first place.
Yeah.
Because a lot of comedians, they do it, and they ends up, really, they do it for toxic reasons, and they don't even know. They get lost in the whole, grind, as we call it in the business, and don't even know why they're doing it. They're just
Yeah.
like, I just need the validation. And hopefully it's more than the validation that you're doing it for. Hopefully your purpose is that you want to make people laugh, you want to bring joy, that kind of thing. I know in one of the last couple episodes, we talked about that, because I made a point about how I was kind of losing sight on
Mm,
why I'm doing comedy.
yeah.
And then after a show, some people came up and were out, talking about how grateful they were that we came to their small town, and how much they needed to laugh. And it's like, oh, that's why I'm doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we put it all together and say, like, you can call yourself a comic when you know why, and you can really with conviction say it.
Exactly. Why are you a comedian? And then once you know that, then you can say, hey, I am a comedian.
Yeah. And if you enjoy doing it, and
Yeah.
it's up to you.
Exactly. I don't think there's always going to be stand-up purists that have, and if you're listening and you don't know what I mean by a stand-up purist, I'm simply saying it's somebody who, they think there's a certain way you have to do comedy. These are all the rules. This is how it is. You got to do these things to be this or whatever. That's what I mean by that. And it's, there are comics that are out there that are like that, but usually they're grumpy, bitter people who didn't make it as far as they wanted to, and that's why they're like that. So, do you be funny?
That's
That's what
right.
I say.
That's
Go
right.
be funny. So,
Nice.
all right. I think that's going to do it for this week's episode of Callbacks. We thank you for tuning in and listening. Make sure you're sharing the podcast with your comedy buds so that they can learn more about comedy and we can all get better together. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Until then, have a great weekend.
This has been a Dan Bublitz comedy production. Raw.